MCAT office hours. It is July 31st, 2025. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, founder of Medical School Headquarters, author of the Pre-Med Playbook series, host of the Pre-Med Years, and all-around cool guy, I think. But best of all, colleague of the one, the only, Petros Manassi, VP of Test Prep and Tutoring at MSHQ. Petros, you have a couple decades under your belt in the MCAT and pre-med space. Not to age you, date you, whatever that saying is. But we like that because you know a thing or two, because you've seen a thing or two, as the farmers commercials say.
That's right.
About the MCAT. If you are new here, we are new here. The MCAT office hours is new here. We've been doing the pre-med office hours with Medical School Headquarters for several years now. But now that we have MCAT services and tutoring and all that kind of stuff in-house at Medical School Headquarters now, we're continuing the kind of path of creating more and more content for helping more and more students as much as we can. So that's what we are here for. If you have questions about MCAT timing, if you have questions about MCAT strategy, if you just want to vent about the MCAT, we can do that. Petros, are we doing a question today, or talking about something?
We are doing a question today.
All right, so we'll do that as well. I would love to answer some questions before we jump into the little slide deck and going over a question as well. For those of you watching, there's a handful of you watching right now. Are you registered to take the MCAT yet? If not, are you registering this October? Right, Petros? Every October is when registration opens.
Yeah.
Any tips? I was talking this morning to a parent and a kid. I was like, getting your MCAT registration is worse than getting Taylor Swift tickets. Any tips for registration to make that process smoother?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's that bad, but it can be, right? Is what it is. So a couple things in terms. So one, registration. We don't even know what the dates are for 26 yet. Registration won't open until October. So there's nothing you can do right now, literally. But once the dates are announced, once you start to kind of plan out things, here is what you can do. Number one, from a operational logistics perspective, go to the AMC account and create your profile. So kind of put in all your information so that you're not doing that when you're booking your actual test date. Similar to buying concert tickets, right? Whatever platform it is you use to buy tickets for a concert, if you have your credit card information stored, you have your address stored, all those things, that saves you time in the checkout process, which means you're going to get your tickets faster. So same thing goes with the MCAT. That's the kind of logistical side of things. Again, you can't do anything with it because that portal is not yet open, but at some point, well before registration opens, it will open. Second thing you can do is pick your ideal test date, so your preferred test date, and testing location. So this is where kind of the decision tree comes into play. So one, pick the day that you want to test, and then where you want to test. So ideally you're testing as close to home as possible, right? You don't want a long commute. And then pick your second choice. Now your second choice may be a different date. Oftentimes the test is offered on a Friday and a Saturday. So it really doesn't matter if you do it on the Friday or the Saturday, right? Unless you have obligations on one of those 2 days. But say, okay, second choice, do I change my date? Or am I willing to maybe travel a little bit further if there are multiple testing locations in your area or close to you? Now, that's not usually the case, but in some localities, there are multiple locations that you could go to. So yes, I want to test on this day, but I'm willing to travel a little bit further as a second choice, or no, I'd rather go to, the second choice as far as test date at the location. So basically create your priority list as far as your ranking is concerned of where you want to test. So you have that already essentially for yourself. So now what you've done is you've got the logistics out of the way. You've got your kind of priority, right? I want these seats or these locations. And then that way, when registration does open, you can go in and pick your test date with your location, click submit, process the payment, and you're registered, right? You've eliminated any kind of decision making that you have to do. If your first ranking isn't available, you know what your second ranking is. You're not doing any thinking on,
and that's what I'm sure everyone does, is they're like, oh shoot, my what I wanted isn't available. Now I have to go back and look at my calendar, look at the MCAT testing calendar. Let me go look at other locations. So do all of that, come up with, what do you think, like top 5, top 10 options?
Depending on your location, maybe 5 to 10 is fine. Yeah. You could go more than that. I mean, let's put it this way. You have plenty of time from the time they tell you when the test dates are and where the locations are going to be to when the registration actually opens. Take an hour and you can knock out 20 prior, a listing of 20 and you'll be ready to go. So it's not overly difficult is what it comes down to. So what I would say as far as, like choosing a test date, think about the month and then get into the specific days, right? Like if you know you're going to be, for instance, let's say you want to test in March and you know that you have spring break, great time to test, right? Like or if you're thinking I want to use spring break as kind of my final push for studying, then maybe you're testing after spring break, right? So look at all those things as well. We'll talk more about that, I think, in detail as the kind of date approaches, right? The urgency approaches. Something maybe in September, I would anticipate being kind of a good time. But that's that.
Do you know, for students who may want to start exploring this now, is it every Pearson testing center will offer the MCAT or no?
It's usually the case, but it's like anything else. There's so many computers, so many seats at any of these centers, and it's based on supply, demand, and desire.
And not everyone testing at that center is taking the MCAT. The AAMC is like renting a couple of some percentage of those seats.
Exactly.
But students can potentially just go onto Google Maps right now, look for Pearson testing centers to get an idea of what may be available in their area.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then we've mentioned, I think, before, but for everyone listening right now, something that is changed for this year. It happened last year, but it was more of a fluke, a consequence of registration issues. But there will be February test dates this year, and theoretically moving forward. So
so it was announced that there will be a February test date. So that was, and I asked the folks at the AMC when we were at, I forget which conference, and they said it would be a February test date. And it was not that they were adding an additional day of testing. It was just they were going to move one of the test dates into February. So that was the message that I got. So there have been times where there has been a February test date, but it's because of like how the weeks of the year worked out and the calendar kind of thing. So there was like X week of the year and it just happened to be February 28th kind of thing. So
last year they did it because after register, I don't know if you've heard this horror story. I'm sure you have. People paying 3 times for a test date and then never actually getting one, and they're like, "Oh, oops."
There were some operational hurdles that needed to be compensated for. So
how this wasn't a new thing that you guys do, AAMC. How do you screw this up every year?
It happens, right? It happens. I mean, Ticketmaster has crashed their website and they sell tickets all the time.
Shimate. Hello, Dr. I am Petros. I'll be taking the MCAT in April 2026. Do you suggest I take the in-between 10-minute breaks or just the 30-minute lunch break only? Interesting. Any break strategy there? Take them, don't take them?
Take them. Don't not take them. Here's the reason. Just give yourself, if anything, just you're doing nothing for 10 minutes. So here's the problem. If you don't take the 10-minute break in between the first 2 sections and the second 2 sections, or the third and fourth sections, you might feel great. You're like, I'm on a roll here, right? I want to keep going. I don't want this party to stop. But then all of a sudden you get into the section and you go, oh, I do need a break. And then you can't go take it. So you can't get that time back. You can't go back and say, oh, I didn't take my 10-minute break. Now I want my 10-minute break. The second kind of wise reason to do it is you need to reset your mind, plain and simple. You are, I mean, on this exam, you're moving from, it's very stark changes, right? You're going from the chem phys section to cars. That is as drastic of a difference as you could imagine. So if you don't take the break, it's very easy to, I use the term section bleed through, where you're still thinking about the chem phys section while you're doing the car section, but you can't go and change anything about the chem phys section. So take the break. You're not, there are no extra points for not taking the break, kind of thing. Why not use it to your advantage? If anything, just to like stretch your mind, stretch your body, right? Like just to kind of,
yeah. In the wise words of In Vogue, free your mind and the rest will follow.
Will follow, yeah.
There you go. Akash, MCAT 496, GPA 3.8, Science 3.7. Apply or retake and apply next year. Whew. So little admissions advice here, but some MCAT stuff. 496 for us on the admissions side, Petros. That's like, is there a medical school that will accept a 496? Yeah, that we know students that have been accepted with 496, but it's like, it's not the norm. So retake, yeah.
I would highly advise a retake.
Yeah, I mean, this is one, Akash, where maybe scheduling a call with Petros, figuring out how you studied, what went wrong, and then maybe trying to figure out how maybe our tutors can help you move forward to improve that score. Because the worst thing you can do is just get right back into the way that you were studying before, and you end up right in the same spot.
I had that conversation yesterday, actually, with somebody.
Yeah.
Who, literally repeated the same score, and it was a considerably low score, and it was because, well, I did the same thing I did the first time. It's like, well, there you go. So, like, and we're gonna help you fix that. So
yeah. All right. Nord, hello Nord. Thank you for the VPN software that I use. It works really well. I am on my 4th gap year, 4.0 GPA, 350 hours in hospice volunteering, 8,000 research hours, with a few publications and awards, 300 hours of tutoring refugees, with some hobbies, but no MCAT yet. Is March okay? Yeah. March is great.
Yeah. You're fine. I mean, it's August. Well, it's still technically July, but tomorrow it's August, so you've got plenty of time between August and March to prep and prepare and to take the MCAT. So
yeah, go for it, Nord. I don't see any shadowing on there. Make sure you're getting some consistent shadowing. Make sure that hospice volunteering, you're continuing. The ideal situation is you're getting some more traditional clinical experience as well, working in a more clinical setting, CNA, EMT, medical assistant kind of role. But yeah, keep going. Lots of research. You don't need any more research. Please stop the research. Marvin, 511 MCAT, 124 cars. That's the jam. Do you think a retake is needed for the car section? I had a really hard time with cars. 124 was always my highest. Petros, 511.7 or 8, whatever the new data is the average MCAT score for matriculated, at least through AMCAS, through the AAMC. So they're right on target there. Lots of people are always concerned about having this kind of, they call it an unbalanced MCAT score with these sections.
Right.
Thoughts on 124?
124 is a tricky one because it definitely is below the average for the cars section, but then your overall score, to your point, is right there, right, as far as the average of matriculants. The problem with the MCAT is you can't go and just take one section, right? So, and the last thing you'd want to do, because it depends on how schools look at your scores, is you wouldn't want to go and just be like, I'm only studying cars this time, and then the other sections come out lower, and your car score improves and all that good stuff. So this one probably requires a little bit more digging. So Marvin, I think, set up some time with me to kind of go through why you're saying you've had a hard time with it. And, because here's the good news. You you scored on the actual exam where you were always, where your highest score was. So like, okay, you didn't, it's not the other conversation, which is I was scoring higher and then on test day it dropped off, right? So like, okay, let's figure out, is there something that can be done if you wanted to retake for the cars, and then also make sure that you maintain the other areas. So
yeah. I'll tell you, Marvin, from an admission standpoint, we're fine with a 124. If you're happy with your 511, I wouldn't be super concerned with the 124. Big picture. The one school I always point to in this situation is Emory, because they have pretty clear language on their website that anything less than a 124 is considered non-competitive. So I think schools are fine with 124 as long as the MCAT's okay. The overall score is okay. But oftentimes, I think I had this conversation earlier today with someone who had a 514. We didn't talk about section scores, but you see, Petros, I didn't say subsections. We didn't talk about section scores. And she was like, yeah, I haven't really thought about retaking it. I was like, I wouldn't recommend retaking it. But if you were scoring like 525s consistently on your AAMC test, and you're like, where did this 514 come from? Right. It's such a unique, individualized conversation around that. All right. Thanks, Marvin. Whenever I see Marvin, I'm like, I think of Back to the Future. Do you remember that the scene at the dance? Marvin, gotta listen to this.
New sound, right?
Mel. My MCAT score is a 508 and my GPA is a 3.8. Should I give up on applying to mid-tier medical schools? Mel, I'll tackle this one. There's no such thing as a mid-tier medical school. This is just made up junk by Student Doctor Network and Reddit. What does mid-tier mean? Like, does mid-tier mean you get a mid-tier education? Does it mean you get a mid-tier career and a mid-tier job? Like, there's no such thing. 508 is within one standard deviation of the average for matriculated medical students. You have a 3.8. It's there. It's a good MCAT score. It's not fantastic. It's a good score. You should apply to the schools that you want to apply to. Mid-tier. Gotta get that vocabulary out of people. Stop. This is MCAT related. I'm aiming to submit my primaries and take the MCAT around the same time of June 2026. Will it harm my app to have a pending MCAT score? Petros, what are your thoughts on this? This is, again, a little more admissions angle, but what do you typically talk about with this?
So in this situation, where I would point you towards is doing fewer things, but doing them well. And here's what I mean by that. Levy, the question is, I want to submit primaries and take the MCAT around the same time. Whether it's going to harm your app to have a pending MCAT score, I'm not going to answer that right now, right? I'm going to point you towards the fact that you want to be putting your primaries together and taking the MCAT, which means studying for the MCAT at the same time. Here's what I'd say. Move the MCAT up as far as when you're planning on taking it, so that you're not trying to do two very time-consuming things at the same time, right? Like, that's really, I think, the bigger issue. Whether or not having the pending MCAT score on your application, that's a separate issue, but just trying to do both at the same time, way too much. And you're not, you're just not gonna be able to dedicate the time to it. So.
Yeah, so Levi, that's exactly where I would go. Is why are you planning on taking the MCAT so late? When ideally you get it out of the way, but when you're also ready, ideally, right? And it's out of the way, as Petros, you were mentioning, is so you can focus on the applications. And my guess is that students want to try to remove the MCAT as far away as possible from finals and all of the classes and stuff like that.
Sure.
And if someone is in a situation where maybe they struggled their first couple of years of undergrad and they're trying to get their trends up, they don't want a distraction there, which makes complete sense. And so then there's sometimes the conversation of, well, like, just finish school then as well as you can, and then worry about the MCAT, and then worry about applications maybe the next cycle. So there's a lot going on there. It's funny. We always learn about these nuanced schools, which is why we always answer it depends most of the time when students ask us questions based on what med schools might do. For the most part, from an admission standpoint, we historically say if you have a pending MCAT score, the medical schools will just put your application on hold, right? It'll just be marked incomplete. To be complete, typically the four things you need are primary, secondary, MCAT, and LORs. Those are typically the four things. Some schools may have the Casper and Preview, those SJT, situational judgment tests, thrown in there, but typically those four. We saw recently, our team was sharing as part of a secondary application. I forget the school. I want to say it was Mayo, but don't quote me. Where the school said, if you have a pending MCAT score and you already have an MCAT score as part of your application, do not submit your secondary until your pending score is actually received. And that was very interesting to see. And I'm glad the school instructs students appropriately to say, hey, this is our process. If you're applying to us and you have one score already, we're going to look at that one score if we have all of your information, primary, secondary, and MCAT score, and LORs. We're not going to wait for that pending MCAT score. And I was like, whoa, right? There's the it depends. So it's very interesting whether that's a limitation of whatever software product they use. They just can't mark applications incomplete, which to me probably isn't the case. It's probably just their process. They're like, we don't want applications just sitting around forever. So I don't know. That was a cool one. All right, we're going to take a break from answering some questions, but keep them coming because we should have some time at the tail end. Petros, if you want to jump into
sure.
Our topic today.
Yeah, topic today is a fun one. I'm always going to try to pick a fun one, right? Like it's there's a reason behind, there's a method to the madness is what it is. So we're gonna look at a standalone question, but it's not so much the topic that I think is interesting and insightful for everyone. It's a little bit about this process of how to actually, at times, there are going to be questions that you can use the question to your advantage. And I'm going to show you what we mean by that. This happens more oftentimes than not. And it's a time saver. And the reason why I say it's a time saver is because there are going to be some questions that you can't save any time and you have to do the long way, right? You got to do all the work. But for questions, if you can identify a question that you go, oh, there's actually some clues in here that I could be using to really kind of shave off massive amounts of time, then I can use that later on other questions and other passages that I can't do that for. So you kind of, you play your cards is what you do in that. I always open with this just as a general reminder as far as how the MCAT actually works, right? There's the prior knowledge that you're bringing into the situation. There's the new information that's given to you from the passages or from the questions themselves. That's there for you to reason out an answer choice, which is the exact same process as what physicians are doing, right? They've got their prior knowledge. They get the new information from the patients to reason out a diagnosis. So this is very much, right? Very much in line as far as the critical thinking aspects that you'll be doing in the future, right? So this is not, oh, I'm doing this thing for the MCAT and I'm never going to have to see this again. Here is a representative, very typical MCAT type question. It's a standalone question. The question actually does a couple of interesting things. I'm just going to walk you through this just so we can kind of see. And notice I didn't even put the answer choices on here yet, and that's deliberate because I want you to see how this thing is structured. The first sentence, they tell us something, right? They say the sodium potassium ATPase, right? Sodium potassium pump normally exports 3 sodium ions from the cytosol and imports 2 potassium ions per ATP that's hydrolyzed. We say, wait a minute, I've seen this before, right? This is not new information. Very typical of the MCAT. They give you information that you already know, which really is them telling you very politely, we're not going to reward you for knowing this information. We're gonna, we've just laid this out for you. If you'd forgotten that this was the rule, great. Now you know what it is, right? So you didn't even necessarily know about the sodium potassium pump and its characteristics in order to solve this question, because they literally gave you the kind of key point. Then they kind of, like any good story, they throw the wrench into the story, right? They say a newly discovered marine toxin, doesn't matter what the marine toxin is, alters the pump so that each catalytic cycle exports only 2 sodium ions while importing 3 potassium ions. And you go, okay, wait a minute. There's the twist, right? Now we've got, instead of 3 out as far as the sodiums, we've got 2 out as far as the sodiums. As far as 2 in for the potassiums, now we've got 3 in. So there's the change, right? There's a difference of 1 between the 2. And then they actually ask you the question, which of the following cellular changes is most consistent with exposure to this toxin? In other words, if you were to expose this toxin, what would you expect to happen? And then they give you the answer choices. And here are the answer choices, right? So it's all these words, right? There's lots of words that are on the screen. And this is a tactic that the MCAT does use, in which the answer choices are relatively long, right? They are, compared to other answer choices. We looked at one a couple weeks ago when we were looking at Gibbs free energy. They were literally just 3-digit numbers. Those were very short answer choices. These are very long statements that have been given to you, which means it could be a very long time crunch for you to go through and read through all of these words. But this is where you have to start thinking like a test taker, and you want to start looking for clues. If you just look at the first words of each of these 4 answer choices, you'll start to see a pattern, right? It's hyperpolarization, depolarization, hyperpolarization, depolarization, right? So I'm not going to tell you right now. You don't need to worry about what's hyperpolarization, what's depolarization, but you know that the opening word for each of these answer choices is either one of these 2 words, hyper or depolarization, right? Like that's already been kind of given to you. The other kind of area that should pop out at you is if you were to look at the last part, you've got decreased, increased, increased, and decreased, right? So we've got these kind of key words. So if we underline them, here's the pattern. The part in the middle of the resting membrane potential with an or with a, that's the same for all of them, right? That's literally the same connector between the front part of the sentence or the front part of the statement and the back part of the statement. So really kind of mentally how you should be thinking about this answer choice is like this, where it's hyperpolarization, depolarization, hyper, right? Decreased, increased, increased, decreased, right? You've got those. And then kind of the third part is the first 2 answer choices deal with sodium. The second 2 answer choices deal with potassium, right? So now you all of a sudden have this kind of rubriciness of a pattern where if you're able to make a very clear kind of prediction, you don't have to read through all the words. You just need to be looking for the factuality that's true, right? So what we know as far as outcomes are concerned, and I'm not even going to suggest that you worry about the front part of this, the hyper and the depolarization. Just look at the back part. It's either decreased intracellular sodium concentration or increased sodium concentration, or it's increased potassium concentration or decreased potassium concentration. Only one of these 4 is going to be true. Therefore, you don't even need to figure out whether that's a hyperpolarized or depolarized state. Questions so far? I know there's a little bit of a delay, so wait a couple seconds here. But
what questions do you have? Yeah, I like it. I like where they take, and this is, I think, just a good point as we pause here and people can ask some questions they might have. I think this is where the MCAT really thrives and why students struggle with it.
Mm-hmm.
The MCAT is assuming you have this foundational level of understanding of the science and enough understanding of the science that if it turns some dials and tweaks some things, you can go, oh, wait, I know what's going to happen here, or I can figure it out pretty quickly without what most class tests have you figure out or don't figure out is like, do you just know what the norm is?
Yeah.
Right. And the MCAT is like, I know you know what the norm is. Now I'm going to tweak it. What do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah. This is an incorporation of a new if, right? Yep. If I do this, now what's going to happen, right? And I've given you all the evidence to solve the puzzle, but it's a puzzle is what it is. So yeah, that's exactly it. I mean,
the example I give all the time, and I think it's one that maybe resonates with students because it's such the common example, is amino acids, right? The MCAT assumes you know what lysine looks like, you know what arginine looks like, all these amino acids, you know what they look like, you can draw them, but we only draw them on a 2D surface. And maybe we understand in a 3D world what that looks like, but most of the time we're just looking at it on a 2D surface. And the MCAT goes, yeah, but what if you are now behind the page looking at it reverse? Can you still figure out what this is?
Yeah.
And what may have changed here? And I think just being able as a student to go, okay, great, I see this, whatever the topic is, I see this thing in front of me. Do I also understand it from the right side? Do I also understand it from the left side, from the bottom, from the top, from behind? That's what the MCAT wants you to do.
Yeah. Kind of coupled on that, they like testing the exceptions to the rule, right? So if the usual rule is that, there's a trend upwards, but there's this one little blip where it doesn't go upwards, that's the one they like to test you on because we're so used to learning the trends. Jennifer, good question. Is this the type of question where the answer is in the question stem? The answer isn't in the question stem per se, but all the clues that you need to solve the answer, yes, they gave you the information, right? They've shared with you the information as far as the background info of the sodium potassium pump in this case. What they haven't given you though is you understanding the movement, right? The directions. They've told you that it's going from the cytosol out, right? And it's going from the side or going into the cytosol, but they haven't given you all the kind of the core piece just yet. But yes, this is one where there's a lot of information there for you to be able to solve. It's kind of like a mini passage in a way, right? It's a 3-sentence passage, 2-sentence passage. Does it work? Any other questions about this? Type them in. Kind of answer them as we go. Let's take a quick pause though. So we've got this kind of organization mentally. Let's actually look at the sodium potassium pump and what it's normally doing. So normally, right, it's 3 sodium out, 2 potassium in. So the net movement is +1 on the outside of the cell. That's what normally is happening. So that's what you have to figure out. And so in a situation where the sodium is going out at 3 and the potassium's coming in at 2, and obviously there are other channels that things can move through, but we're ignoring those because we're looking very specifically, assuming that all those are operating normally, right? They're staying the same. This is the one that is being changed. There's a net movement of +1 to the outside. So you are effectively polarized, right? In the sense that you have, it doesn't in cells and it doesn't, and in chemistry, it doesn't matter what the ion is, right? So a sodium ion, which is a +1, and a potassium ion, which is a +1, they are equal because they're both carrying 1 positive charge. So I basically have 3 positive charges going out, and then I'm losing 2 of those positive charges that come back in. So I have a net movement of 1 positive charge to the outside of the cell, right? So that's how I'm polarized in that direction. With the toxin in place, now, the movement direction doesn't change, right? And I mean, follow the arrows here. The sodium is still going out of the cell. The potassium is still coming into the cell, but I'm losing 2 sodiums and I'm gaining 3 potassium. So now my +1 is on the inside of the cell. So here's my question to you. And this is, regardless of the answer choices just yet, is my sodium concentration going up outside of the cell, or is it going down outside of the cell compared to before, right? Just looking at the sodium, what's happening to it? Going up or is it going down? Well, before it was 3 sodiums going out Now it's only 2 sodiums going out. So therefore, it's going down on the outside of the cell, which means there's more sodium on the inside of the cell than there was in the normal situation, right? Because I'm not losing as many. And the opposite is true for the potassium, right? There's more potassium on the inside of the cell than there was before, because before I was bringing in 2, now I'm bringing in 3. So that means there's going to be the flip, right? There was more on the outside of the cell in the normal situation, less on the outside of the cell with the toxin. All right. So this is, that's what it comes down to. So now you actually have your prediction, right? Kind of going into this, right? Because this is what we had seen before. The plain and simple of this is we're looking at this from the perspective of the concentrations, and the question was asking what's going to be happening as far as the cellular changes are concerned. Well, I know that I have an increased concentration of sodium that is inside of the cell. So the answer has to be B. I didn't even have to worry, and this is where I'm going with this. We didn't even have to worry about whether this is depolarized or hyperpolarized, right? The first part of all these answer choices were nothing more than distractors that were there, right? That's literally what they were there for, is to try to throw you off. Yes, it is a depolarized compared to before, right? So as far as a cellular change is concerned, it is depolarized because you have an increased amount of sodium that's going to be on the inside because you're not losing as much as you were before. So yes, it is depolarized because relative to the original, remember the +1 was on the outside originally. Now the +1 is on the inside, and you have an increased amount of sodium concentration, right? That is going to be on the inside. You also have an increased amount of potassium concentration that's going to be on the inside because of this new movement as far as the directions are concerned. So that's where it is, right? That's where it's going to come into play as far as all of these are concerned. And that's how we look at this and we say, all right, now we have answer choice B, right? That's that. You do have an increase. You do have an increase as far as K is concerned, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why it's not C is because of the charges, right? So the hyperpolarization versus the depolarization. So this is the normal, right? As far as what should be on the outside, we should be polarized towards the outside. Now we have gone in the opposite direction, so we have depolarized relative to before as far as the cellular changes are concerned. So that's why
I think I need to see those definitions, because that's where I'm confused too. How do I know that it's hyper versus D? That's depolarized versus hyperpolarized.
Yeah, so depolarization is so when you're in a polarized state, you are at some membrane differential, right? As far as, and that's not kind of what the purpose of today is, but you're at a membrane differential between the outside and the inside, right? Plain and simple. So
no matter what the numbers are, there's a
no matter what the numbers are, right? You are polarized. So think of it as the +1 here. That's what's causing the polarization.
Mm-hmm.
Because that +1 moved to the other side, right? That or think of it like this: the +1 went to 0 on the right side. That means I'm depolarized relative to before. If the +1 went to +2, then I would be hyperpolarized.
There you go.
Compared to before. So just looking at the right side, don't look at the left side, right? What I haven't written on the screen here is that the right side here is now at 0. So it has been depolarized relative to where it was before. If it had gone to +2, then it would have been hyperpolarized, right? So that's the case there. So that's where the depolarization, the hyperpolarization come into play.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if you go back to the answer choices, D is wrong because it's an increased.
D is wrong because it's depolarization, but it's a decreased potassium concentration.
Yeah, and it should be increased.
It should be increased.
Yeah.
Okay. Both the potassium and the sodium increase.
Increased intracellularly.
Intracellularly.
Yeah.
We've literally flipped things around.
Yep. Okay. Sweet.
Tricky, but doable. So
yeah.
That's the
Do you guys, I want to ask for those of you watching, do you like this kind of like, we give you a problem, we work through it, we're also teaching you kind of some of the science behind it as we're going through the problem? Is that helpful for you all? I would want to know. Any other slides?
Just the general kind of question that always comes up in terms of how to map out your MCAT prep. I'll always show this. You'll always see that me sharing this, just because it's so important to recognize that it's not all about content review, right? It's about practicing the application of the practice. So in your early days of your preparation, over on the left-hand side, the gray triangle, that's going to be more content review time, more critical thinking skills, building time. So things like what we looked at here. As you progress, then you start to incorporate more and more practice, right? The only real like full-length exam that you should be taking is early on is a diagnostic exam, just to see where you're at as far as the test is concerned, your score is concerned. You shouldn't be taking full-length exams until you get later in your preparation, as it were. And then, of course, if you want to set up some time to have a quick chat about kind of where you're at and how we can help you, feel free to use that QR code and set up a time accordingly.
Nice. Awesome. Love it. Yeah. So this, I would call this problem-based learning, right, Petros? We're setting up a problem here, working through it.
This is mini problem-based learning in the sense that we started with the problem, right? If I'd done it in the flip, where I said, okay, let's review the sodium-potassium pump, and let's review all the definitions as far as, the sodium-potassium pump and what an ATPA is, blah, blah. I mean, I go through all those things. Yep. And then I show you this question. That's one way to learn it. But instead, if we start with the problem and say, okay, and this is where, I'm a big fan of mysteries. So that's like another fun fact about me. Like I like a good
You must
mystery.
like Scooby-Doo then.
I love, that was my favorite. That's funny that you say that. That was literally, it's actually my icon on one of my awesome. streaming apps is I am Scooby-Doo. So that was actually my favorite as a kid. I have Scooby-Doo socks. I have Scooby-Doo slippers. So there's, there you go. But yeah, I love a good mystery. And one that, throws lots and twists and turns. And that's what the MCAT is it's you're solving a puzzle, right? You're solving a mystery, and you gotta play detective, right? You gotta put your detective hat on and literally say, okay, that's where the problem-based learning really comes into play, where you're looking at the problem and asking yourself, what do I need to be able to solve this problem, right? In this one that we just looked at, we needed to know about the sodium potassium pump. They gave us that information. Great. I didn't have to recall that from my memory. What that's also telling me is that they're not going to reward me for knowing that information, because they just told me that. They told everybody who took this question that information, right?
Yeah.
And then they throw in this, then they throw in the loophole, the toxin, and they tell me how the toxin is changing things. So I don't need to know all. You definitely, for the MCAT, don't need to know all of the marine toxins that are out there. That's not in the scope of your knowledge base that you need to know about. That's why it doesn't even name what the toxin is, because it doesn't matter, right? There could have been another red herring where they actually named out the toxin. You're like, oh, does the structure of the toxin actually matter? No, that's getting overly complicated. So there's a toxin. Great. Okay, something is going to change. What they really wanted you to then go and say is, okay, I need to know where everybody is going to be living once this toxin is in place, right? Where's the sodium going to be? Where's the potassium going to be? How's it going to move things around? And that's, that's where your critical thinking comes into play, right? So that is problem-based learning. And then, similar to what was happening here, right? People are asking questions. Those are the questions that you're asking is, wait a minute, what do I need to know about this? Why isn't it this? And then you now have learned about depolarization and hyperpolarization and the polarized state and the membrane differential that's there. We didn't go into the formal membrane differential conversation here, but that is problem-based learning, and that's very much how things are structured in med school, right? So it's really in life, when you think about it, right? We solve the problems that are presented to us. We don't. It's just kind of a good general piece of advice in life. Don't try to solve problems that you don't yet have. And this happens a lot also in studying for the MCAT. I hear this more times than I care to, where students say, well, what if this happens to me? And I'm like, well, don't worry about that. It hasn't happened to you yet, right? Well, what if I'm not going to have this? We'll figure that out, right? We'll see if you're not running out of time. We'll see if you need more time to test for the exam. We'll see what your score ends up being and whether or not you should be, applying this cycle or applying next cycle or taking time, right? Like those are all things. Somebody asked a question today, like, should I retake the exam? But we had the number, right? Versus, well, what would happen if I get a 124 on my car section? Should I retake it? It's like, it hasn't happened yet. We don't know. So,
yeah. There was a question earlier, kind of a broad question here. Avantika. I recently decided to go to medical school. Have absolutely no idea where to start with the MCAT. Any suggestions?
Well, one great place to start is MCAT office hours. So you can check that. You can check that off.
Here.
Check that off your list. So keep coming to these. So a couple things I'll say right just off the get-go in terms of MCAT specific. Obviously, you've recently decided. So congratulations. Prerequisite coursework, because the prerequisite coursework that you're going to have to take that covers the topics that are on the MCAT. Second part is to start getting yourself familiar with the MCAT. Coming to this and to other events that we have will do that for you. So again, like, congratulations. Obviously, at some point, figuring out when you're going to be applying, when you're going to plan on taking the MCAT in that application timeline accordingly. And then starting to actually learn about the structure of the exam and how the exam is in fact testing you and what topic areas it's testing you. The AMC has some great resources very detailed resources as far as what's fair game and what's not fair game and how the test is actually structured. And then, figuring out from there kind of how you're going to prepare for the exam and going about it accordingly. So
go from there. I asked earlier about whether this format was helpful at medical school headquarters. We're building out a course right now with this kind of format as the foundation of the course. I think a lot of courses, and Petros, you know this, intimately familiar because you've been involved with it for so long. A lot of the courses, it's like content, and then just questions. But we really love this problem-based learning philosophy because, number one, that's how a lot of medical schools teach. So you're starting to learn like a medical student of like, all right, we're presented with a problem. Now let's go learn all the information we need to support answering this problem. So stay tuned for that.
I want to answer Jennifer's question because it's a good one.
Yeah, I was going to throw up.
Yeah. So, if you know that you don't know the topic of the nervous system, then no, you should not be doing any type of nervous system stuff because you need to go learn the nervous system. Problem-based learning works very much so better as far as time crunch is concerned for the MCAT. Works better to at least have been exposed to the topic prior, right? Like and then you use the questions as reinforcement and then, take it from there. So if you go into something knowing nothing, I know nothing about X. You shouldn't ask me any questions about X because I should get them all wrong, right? If any question that I get right would be because I randomly guessed and I happen to get it correct. So, in that case, I think it's important to kind of distinguish that. The whole notion of like advising you to use questions to guide your content review. Yes, that is true, assuming that you've been exposed to content beforehand, right? So
keyword review, not learn.
Not learn. Exactly, right? Yeah. So so use questions to guide your review, not use questions to guide what you should learn. If you haven't learned it, you haven't learned it. That being said, Jennifer, in your specific case here with the nervous system, there's a lot to know about the nervous system, right? There are books and books and lots of knowledge about the nervous system. People have studied the nervous system for years and, they still don't learn everything about the nervous system. Make sure that you are learning the stuff that's actually going to be tested on the MCAT, right? Like as far as the scope that the MCAT and the depth that the MCAT is going to go in, as far as the nervous system or any topic for that matter. So, yeah.
Sweet. What other questions do you all have? Or else we'll just end a couple minutes early. If you don't have any other questions, again, medicalschoolhq.net. We have a fantastic team of tutors that are helping students every single day now improve their MCAT scores. We have a course that we'll announce here shortly that we're working on lots of other fun stuff to hopefully continue to help students. And the mission that we have here is making this process easier, more affordable for everyone as we do it. Petros, any last minute thoughts?
I think we covered a lot today, actually.
Yeah.
So this was a pretty robust hour. So no, I think keep at it for sure. It's a long process. It's not a slow process, or it's not a quick process. So
yep.
That'll be that for now until next week is what it is.
Awesome. All right, friends. Pre-med office hours Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Come ask your general admissions pre-med questions there. MCAT office hours for now is on Thursdays at 2 p.m. There's potential thought of changing dates. We'll let you know. We'll keep you updated. But yeah, come hang out. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.